Commander Talvex stared at the holographic display floating above his command console. The coordinates had arrived 3 days ago through encrypted channels that shouldn't have existed. His superiors at Hegemony Command claimed they knew nothing about the transmission, but the data was real. A star system that appeared on no official charts hidden in a sector marked as empty space. "Sir, we're approaching the edge of the unknown system," reported Navigator Kickstall from his station. His voice carried the nervousness that had infected the entire crew since they began this unauthorized mission. The Hegemony exploration vessel Wandering Star had been drifting through space for 6 hours, following coordinates that led them deeper into uncharted territory. Talvex had convinced his crew that this could be the discovery of their careers. Ancient ruins, lost technology, perhaps even traces of the mysterious precursor civilization that had vanished millions of years ago. "Begin passive scanning," Talvex ordered, his forearms working across multiple control surfaces. "I want to know what's out there before we announce our presence." The main screen flickered to life, showing a yellow star surrounded by 8 planets. The 4th planet from the star glowed with artificial lights that could be seen even from their distant position, but that wasn't what made the bridge crew fall silent. Surrounding the 4th planet was a fleet. Not just any fleet. Thousands of ships hung motionless in the void, their dark hulls barely visible against the starfield. The vessels were unlike anything in the Hegemony database. Sleek and predatory, they looked more like weapons than exploration ships. Each one was roughly the same size as Talvex's own vessel, but their design suggested capabilities far beyond anything the Hegemony had ever built. "By the ancestors," whispered Communications Officer Zevnal. "How many ships are out there?" "Scanning shows approximately 4,000 vessels," reported Science Officer Hilmar, her voice barely steady. "They appear to be powered down, but energy readings suggest they could activate at any moment." Talvex felt his breathing quicken. This was no archaeological discovery. They had stumbled upon someone's military installation, someone who had been hiding in a system that was supposed to be empty. "Sir, what are your orders?" asked his second-in-command, Captain Jorvik. Before Talvex could respond, every screen on the bridge flashed with an incoming transmission. The universal first contact protocols activated automatically, but instead of the expected data exchange, a single message appeared in perfect Hegemony script. "You should not have come here." The bridge erupted in confused chatter. Talvex raised one hand for silence while his other 3 worked frantically at his console. "How is this possible? No one outside the Hegemony speaks our language." "Sir," Navigator Kickstall called out, his voice tight with fear, "the fleet is powering up." On the main screen, thousands of dark shapes began to glow with a haunting blue light. Ship after ship came online in perfect synchronization, their engines creating a constellation of stars around the distant planet. The sight was both beautiful and terrifying. A new transmission arrived, this time with visual. The face that appeared on screen was unlike anything in the galactic database. Pale skin, dark hair, and strange round eyes that seemed to see everything. The creature wore what appeared to be a military uniform, with symbols that meant nothing to Talvex. "I am Admiral Li Dongwu of the Terran Defense Force," the being said, speaking flawless Hegemony standard. "You have entered a restricted system. State your intentions." Talvex struggled to find his voice. Terrans? The species that had only recently achieved faster-than-light travel? According to all intelligence reports, humans were still confined to their home system and a few nearby colonies. They were considered a minor species, barely worth monitoring. "I am Commander Talvex of the Hegemony Exploration Service," he managed to say. "We received coordinates to this system and came to investigate. We mean no harm." The human's expression didn't change. "Coordinates? How interesting, and who exactly provided these coordinates?" "We don't know. They arrived through encrypted channels. Our command believes they may have originated from an automated precursor beacon." Something that might have been amusement flickered across the human's features. Precursor beacon. Yes, that would be a logical assumption. Around them, the massive fleet continued its awakening. Talvex could see now that these ships weren't just larger than he had initially thought. They were more advanced. The hull designs incorporated materials and technologies that shouldn't have existed. Energy patterns his sensors couldn't fully identify flowed across their surfaces. "Admiral," Talvex said carefully, "your fleet appears to have been here for some time. How long have your people occupied this system?" "Long enough," Lee replied. "The better question is whether you leave here peacefully, or whether this becomes a problem for both our species." The threat was politely delivered but unmistakable. Talvex looked around his bridge at the faces of his crew. They were explorers, not soldiers. Their ship carried scientific equipment and research teams, not weapons capable of challenging even a single vessel from the fleet surrounding them. But something else nagged at him. The human had spoken of precursor beacons, as if the explanation was expected. As if this encounter had been planned. "Admiral Lee," he said slowly, "I believe we need to talk." The docking bay of the human flagship was unlike anything Commander Talvex had ever seen. Clean metal walls curved in impossible angles, and the artificial gravity felt stronger than what his species was used to. 2 human guards escorted him through corridors that hummed with hidden energy. Their weapons looked simple but somehow more dangerous than the plasma rifles his own security teams carried. Admiral Lee Dongwu waited in a conference room that could have held 50 beings. The human stood with his hands behind his back, looking out through a massive window at the fleet beyond. Up close, Talvex could see the ships moved in patterns too complex for random patrol routes. They were following some kind of choreographed dance that spoke of years of practice. "Please sit," Lee said without turning around. His voice carried an authority that made Talvex obey without thinking. 2 other humans entered the room. A woman with sharp eyes who introduced herself as Captain Park Subin, and a younger male called Lieutenant Commander Kim Da-un. Both wore the same strange uniforms with symbols that meant nothing to Talvex, but their bearing suggested extensive military experience. "You said you wanted to talk." Admiral Lee finally turned to face him. "So let's talk about why you're really here." Talvex shifted uncomfortably in the human-sized chair. "As I said, we received coordinates. We thought this might be an archaeological site." Captain Park smiled, but it wasn't friendly. "Commander, we know exactly when those coordinates were sent, what route they took through your communication networks, and which of your superiors decided to ignore protocol by sending you here without backup." The words hit Talvex like cold water. "That's impossible. Our encryption systems are based on mathematical principles we helped develop 200 years ago." Lieutenant Commander Kim interrupted softly. "We've been monitoring hegemony communication since before your great-grandfather was born." Talvex felt his 4 hearts beating faster. "But humans only achieved faster-than-light travel 30 years ago. Your first contact with galactic civilization was barely 2 decades past." Admiral Lee walked to the table and activated a holographic display. Star charts appeared in the air between them, but these weren't the standard galactic maps Talvex knew. These showed shipping routes, military installations, and population centers for dozens of species across hundreds of systems. "That's what we wanted everyone to believe," Lee said quietly. "The truth is somewhat different." The display changed, showing a timeline that made Talvex's mind struggle to accept what he was seeing. Human ships had been moving through space for centuries before their official first contact, not just exploring but building. Hidden bases and systems marked as forbidden or dangerous. Supply routes that connected secret installations across the galaxy. While your people and others were focused on trade agreements and territorial disputes, Captain Park continued, we were focused on survival. We learned early that the galaxy is a dangerous place for species that announce their presence too loudly. Lieutenant Commander Kim touched a control, and the display showed incident reports from across known space. Wars that ended mysteriously, when one side lost key resources. Pirates who vanished without explanation. Plague ships that changed course away from populated worlds for no apparent reason. You've been interfering, Talvex whispered. We've been maintaining stability, Lee corrected. A chaotic galaxy serves no one's interests, especially not ours. The implications crashed over Talvex like a wave. Every major galactic event of the past century suddenly took on new meaning. The hegemony's own expansion had proceeded smoothly, because human ships had been quietly removing obstacles. Trade routes stayed open because human forces eliminated threats before they became problems. The Centauri War, he said slowly. The solar flares that prevented the final battle. Not solar flares, Captain Park confirmed. Controlled stellar manipulation. We couldn't allow either side to develop the weapons they were planning. The asteroid that almost hit Kepler Prime 15 years ago. Redirected by gravity generators we'd placed in the system decades earlier. Lieutenant Commander Kim added, the Kepler system houses 12 billion beings. We couldn't risk that population center. Talvek struggled to process the scale of what they were telling him. How many systems do you control? Control is the wrong word, Admiral Lee said. We maintain presence in 47 systems, full operational bases in 12 others. Monitoring. Stations in over 200 locations. The human walked back to the window, gesturing at the fleet outside. This is one of our smaller installations. The ships you see represent about 3% of our total military capacity. 3%? Talvex repeated numbly. The question now, Captain Park said, leaning forward, is what happens next. You've seen something that changes everything you thought you knew about galactic politics. Lieutenant Commander Kim activated another display. Your species isn't the first to find us, Commander. In the past 50 years, 3 other exploration fleets have discovered our installations. What happened to them? The 3 humans exchanged glances. Admiral Lee returned to the table and sat across from Talvex. That depends entirely on their intentions when they found us, he said simply. 2 of those species came with peaceful curiosity, much like yourselves. They were given a choice. And the 3rd? The Karthak Collective arrived with battle fleets and demands for surrender. Captain Park's voice grew cold. They made their choice clear. Talvex didn't need to ask. What had happened to the Karthak? He'd studied the reports of their mysterious disappearance from galactic records. So what choice are you offering me? He asked. Admiral Lee touched a control panel, and the conference room's walls became transparent. Talvex found himself looking out at the human fleet in all directions, ships stretching to the horizon of space. The scale was overwhelming. What he had thought was impressive from his own ship now revealed itself as truly massive. Before we discuss your options, Lee said, quietly, you need to understand the full scope of what you've discovered. Captain Park activated a new holographic display. This one showed the galaxy itself, but marked with symbols Talvex had never seen before. Red dots indicated human installations. Blue lines showed patrol routes. Green markers represented what appeared to be observation posts. We've been watching for 300 years, Park explained. Not just your species, but all of them. The Veltar Confederacy, the Zephyr Republic, the Trade Federation, even the smaller independent worlds. Lieutenant Commander Kim walked around the display, pointing to specific locations. Every major trade route has at least 2 human monitoring stations within 3 light years. Every military installation of significance is under observation. Every government communication hub has been infiltrated. Talvex stared at the display. The human presence was everywhere. Invisible threads connecting systems across the entire galaxy. Why? What could you possibly gain from such extensive surveillance? Survival, Admiral Lee said simply. When we first developed faster than light travel, we sent out exploration ships just like yours. What we found was a galaxy full of species that had been fighting each other for thousands of years. Wars over resources, territory, ideology. The pattern was always the same. The display changed to show historical data, battle records, casualty reports, entire civilizations wiped out in conflicts that lasted centuries. Talvex recognized many of the wars from his own history studies, but the human records contained details that weren't in any official archives. We realized that announcing our presence would make us just another target, Captain Park continued. So we chose a different path. We would learn everything we could about galactic civilization before revealing ourselves. But you did reveal yourselves, Talvex protested. 20 years ago, humans made first contact with the Trade Federation. Lieutenant Commander Kim smiled grimly. That was carefully orchestrated theater. We chose the time, the place, and the circumstances of that contact. We presented ourselves as a young species with limited technology and peaceful intentions. While maintaining this hidden empire, Talvex gestured at the display around them. Empire is the wrong word, Admiral Lee corrected. We don't rule these systems. We protect them. There's a difference. The display showed new information, incident reports, threat assessments, intervention records. Talvex read through them with growing amazement. Pirates eliminated before they could attack trade convoys. Disease outbreaks contained before they could spread. Natural disasters minimized through advanced warning systems. The plague that threatened your homeworld 12 years ago, Captain Park said, watching his reaction. The cure appeared mysteriously in your medical databases overnight. Talvex's breathing quickened. That was you? Our scientists had been tracking the disease for months, Kim confirmed. We developed the cure but couldn't deliver it directly without revealing our presence. So we arranged for your own researchers to find it. The mining accident on Veltar Prime 5 years ago, Admiral Lee added. The rescue equipment that arrived ahead of schedule. The asteroid collision that created new shipping lanes in the outer rim. The diplomatic courier who prevented the border wars from starting. Each revelation hit Talvex like a physical blow. Every positive development in recent galactic history had human fingerprints on it. His people owed their continued existence to the actions of a species they barely knew existed. How many lives have you saved? He asked quietly. We don't keep count, Admiral Lee replied. That's not why we do it. Captain Park walked to another control panel. But we do keep track of threats. Species that show signs of aggressive expansion. Governments that develop weapons of mass destruction. Organizations that traffic in slavery or genetic experimentation. The display showed a new map, this one marked with red warning symbols. Talvex recognized some of the locations as known, trouble spots, but others were systems he'd never heard of. The hegemony appears on this list, Lieutenant Commander Kim said softly. Talvex felt cold fear creep up his spine. What? Why? Your military has been developing planet-killing weapons, Admiral Lee explained matter-of-factly. 3 separate research facilities all working on different approaches to planetary destruction. The projects are highly classified, but not from us. We've been monitoring the progress for 18 months, Captain Park added. The weapons are nearly ready for testing. Talvex wanted to deny it, but he remembered the classified briefings he'd been excluded from, the sudden increase in military spending, the researchers who disappeared into secret projects. What will you do? He asked. That depends on you, Admiral Lee said. Your discovery of this installation wasn't accidental. We've been subtly guiding your people toward finding us. Why? Because we need allies, not just subjects to protect, Lieutenant Commander Kim explained. The galaxy is changing. Threats are emerging that require more than hidden intervention. Admiral Lee leaned forward. We're offering you a choice that we've never offered before. Join us openly. Help us build something better than the shadows we've been operating in. And if I refuse? The 3 humans exchanged glances. Captain Park spoke first. Then you return to your ship with a cover story about finding nothing here. Your weapon programs will suffer mysterious setbacks, but your people will be safe. But the galaxy will continue on its current path, Admiral Lee added quietly. And eventually we may not be able to prevent the next great war. Admiral Lee stood and walked to a different wall panel. When he touched it, the room filled with new holographic displays. These weren't star charts or fleet positions, they were personal files. Detailed records of individuals from across the galaxy, including Commander Talvex himself. Your real name is Talvex Morthani, Lee said without looking back. Born on Hegemony Prime 43 years ago. Graduated top of your class from the Naval Academy. Married to Zelvara Kestol, 2 offspring. Your daughter just started her first year at university studying xenobiology. Talvex felt his blood run cold. How do you know all this? Captain, Park activated another display showing surveillance footage. Talvex recognized his own home, his family walking through their daily routines. The images were recent, taken within the last few days. We know everything about everyone who might pose a threat or offer an opportunity, Park explained calmly. Your psychological profile indicates strong moral principles, scientific curiosity, and genuine concern for galactic peace. You've been studying me? We've been studying your entire species for decades, Lieutenant Commander Kim confirmed. Every military officer above the rank of captain, every government official with security clearance, every scientist working on classified projects. Admiral Lee turned back to face him. The coordinates that brought you here weren't sent by accident, Commander. We've been guiding you toward this discovery for over a year. The room's displays changed again, showing a complex timeline of events. Small incidents, delayed communications, reassigned personnel, modified mission parameters. Each change seemed minor by itself, but together they formed a pattern that had inevitably led to Talvex receiving those mysterious coordinates. The survey mission that was canceled last month, leaving your ship available for this assignment, Captain Park pointed to the timeline. The communications array that malfunctioned, routing the encrypted message to your personal terminal instead of command headquarters. The navigation officer who called in sick, requiring you to personally review the flight plan, Kim added. Talvex stared at the evidence of manipulation that stretched back months. You orchestrated everything. We prefer to think of it as creating opportunities, Admiral Lee said. You were always going to make the final choice to investigate those coordinates. We just removed the obstacles that might have prevented you from doing so. But why me specifically? The displays showed psychological profiles and behavioral analyses, charts tracking decision patterns, moral choices, leadership styles. Talvex saw himself reduced to data points and probability calculations. 3 years ago, you refused direct orders to fire on a refugee ship that had entered hegemony space illegally, Captain Park explained. Instead, you provided them with supplies and safe passage to neutral territory. 2 years ago, you reported your own superior officer for planning to sell military equipment to pirates, Kim continued, even though it cost you a promotion. Last year, you volunteered your ship for a rescue mission in disputed space, knowing it could provoke a diplomatic incident. Admiral Lee finished. You consistently choose what's right over what's easy or profitable. Talvex felt exposed, as if these humans could see into his very soul. And this makes me suitable for what exactly? For the test we're conducting, Lee replied. You're not the first species to find us, Commander. Over the past century, we've guided 7 different civilizations to our hidden installations. New displays appeared, showing records of previous encounters. Ship configurations he didn't recognize, alien faces speaking in languages he'd never heard. Some of the meetings appeared to have gone well. Others had clearly ended badly. The Kethmoran Empire discovered one of our bases 80 years ago, Captain Park said, indicating a particularly hostile-looking species. Their first action was to demand our immediate surrender and the transfer of all our technology. The Volcari Collective found us 50 years ago, Kim added. They offered to spare our lives if we agreed to serve as their scouts and spies throughout the galaxy. The Zarthak Dominion arrived with a battle fleet. Admiral Lee's voice grew cold. They didn't bother with negotiations at all. Talvex noticed that several of the species' names weren't familiar to him. What happened to them? They chose poorly, Lee answered simply. Their civilizations no longer exist. The weight of that statement settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Talvex realized he was looking at beings capable of erasing entire species from existence. Yet they were offering him a choice, instead of simply eliminating the threat he represented. 2 species passed our test, Captain Park continued. The Memtari Collective and the Sylvan Republic. Both chose cooperation over conquest. They've been working with us secretly for decades. Working with you how? Lieutenant Commander Kim activated a new display showing joint operations. Human and alien ships working together on complex missions. Shared technology development. Coordinated efforts to maintain galactic stability. They help us identify threats before they become dangerous, she explained. In return, we share selected technologies and provide protection for their most vulnerable worlds. Admiral Lee walked back to the table and sat down across from Talvex. The question is whether the hegemony will make the same choice. And if we don't, then you return home with no memory of this encounter, Park said matter-of-factly. We have ways of ensuring you remember finding nothing but empty space in this system. Your weapon development programs will experience mysterious failures, Kim added. Your most aggressive military leaders will find themselves reassigned to harmless positions. Your people will be safe, Admiral Lee concluded, but they'll never know how close they came to a much larger role in galactic affairs. Talvex looked around the room at the three humans who held his civilization's fate in their hands. What exactly are you asking me to do? Commander Talvex chose alliance, recognizing wisdom in humanity's patient approach. Within weeks, the first joint research station was operational. Hegemony scientists working alongside humans who had been perfecting their technologies in secret for generations. Standing on the observation deck, Admiral Lee and Commander Talvex watched their crews collaborate with growing efficiency. This is just one of our smaller fleets, Lee mentioned casually, watching Talvex's reaction. There are others scattered throughout the galaxy. Captain Park joined them, datapad in hand. Sir, we're receiving approach signals from the Veltar Confederacy near Outpost 7. Another accidental discovery. Right on schedule, smiled Lieutenant Kim from her new position as liaison officer. Commander Talvex understood then that the galaxy was about to change forever. Humanity didn't just survive. They thrived by being exactly where they needed to be, when they needed to be there. The shepherds were finally ready to step into the light.